Today's webinar is on why creating accessibility policies and statements is essential for compliance. So thank you. Welcome. My name is Bethany Servin, and I'm part of the marketing team here at UsableNet. I think we can go ahead and I'll give it off to Michele for introductions.
Thank you, Bethany. Yeah, my name is Michele Lucchini. I'm the Vice President for Products at UsableNet, and my main role within the company is to define the strategy for our products and making sure they are meaningful for our customers and their needs. I've been dedicating about 25 years of my career to web accessibility, and I actually joined UsableNet 25 years ago. And together with my day-to-day job, I'm also co-author of Content for Everyone, a book that I wrote together with Jeff that is here with us. And Jeff, do you want to tell us something about you?
Yes, thanks, Michele. I'm the Vice President of Accessibility Operations here at UsableNet. I've been here just about half the time that Michele has. I'm in my 13th year here. And in that, I'm talking with our clients about how they can integrate accessibility into their processes, as well as leading our educational program here and the material that we help share with our clients to get them to understand accessibility and what they need to do in their organizations. And as Michele said, we co-wrote Content for Everyone to help bring the messages of accessibility to creative entrepreneurs and solopreneurs who don't necessarily get access to this kind of information. So within the next hour, we're going to be talking about accessibility policies and why you need to document the accessibility expectations inside your organization. We're going to talk about accessibility statements as well and documenting your accessibility work for your customers. And we'll break that down in a few ways. We'll talk about the U.S. standard accessibility statements. And then we'll look at what's going on in the EU and the EA with the EAA, the European Accessibility Act, and those statements that we're starting to see need to be used there. And also what those EU standards mean for US and perhaps non-European Union-based organizations as well. So let's dive in on what the accessibility policy is and why this is an important document for you to have. So the policy is meant as an internally facing document. And there's a few things that this policy document is meant to do. First of all, it's about the reasons why the organization is acting on accessibility. And this helps set the context for people inside the organization to understand why this is becoming, part of their work if it hasn't before. And maybe if they have been doing the work, it also sets out why it's important to make sure they keep that going. It's going to inform the people who get the document to understand the sites and the apps that are covered by this policy. And that can even be broken down in a couple of ways, because it could say, list out sites that are, falling under the policy immediately, and those that might be coming down the line a little later, because depending on the size of the organization, there could be tens, if not hundreds of websites that have to be accounted for. And so this document can help, everybody understand the priorities and where different things are for those sites and apps through the process. It'll lay out the requirements to be followed. In general, that would be the WCAG level, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines level that you need to meet, whether that's, it might be 2.2 if you're following the most recent standards. It could be that you're going to lock yourselves in on 2.1 AA, for example, if you're somebody who is selling to a government entity, or you are a government entity looking to meet the requirements of US Title II regulations. You'll talk about the reporting processes. How often are audits happening? When will they happen? What kind of reporting is happening about ongoing accessibility for remediation efforts and things like that? It'll talk about accountability plans and any key performance indicators or KPIs that might be required within the policy, and how things are going to have to be kept in check to make sure all the teams are performing correctly so that the end product is accessible. And it can help clarify roles, how people's jobs might change as they have to, start being under this policy and doing the work around this policy, so that there's no doubt about who's involved and what their responsibility is within the process around accessibility. If we can slide forward there. Yes, thank you. So I mentioned that this is primarily an internal policy, but there's moments where this can become external as well. There could be, in terms of legal or regulatory uses, that you may need to share this policy or want to share this policy if you need to show proof that you have an accessibility program. You may need to show that to customers. So this policy could travel alongside a VPAT, for example, if you need to show that kind of work. If you're under Title II, you now have this document available to be able to show, people who are asking about Title II, the work that you're doing around accessibility. Also, if you might be under a lawsuit of some kind, in the U.S. where it's very litigious, this can also help be proof that you do have an accessibility program in place and the steps that you're taking to ensure the sites are accessible. It can also be very helpful when you're working with vendors, because this can be a document you give to them to let them know the requirements that you have for them to meet your accessibility standards. That could be if you're hiring a vendor to do like design work, development work, maybe QA work, so that they know, what they need to provide to you to meet your accessibility. It can also be used to help vendors understand your policies if you're bringing in a component, whether it's a chat bot or maybe a review widget, cookie banners, privacy banners, that kind of material, so that they know what you're expecting of them, so that it's a very clear-cut understanding of the accessibility level they need to meet when working with you. So let's take a look at what actually goes into a policy and kind of our recommended sections for this. This is what I typically talk to partners that I'm working with as they're integrating accessibility into policy or into process rather, and how to start building out a policy. So it starts with the accessibility mission statement and kind of that why accessibility matters to the organization. You might even be able to draw off some of the material that is in the about pages about on your website already, and some of the companies already formed mission statements. There's often things in there that you can pull into the policy to help explain why accessibility is so key to your organization. You'll detail again those digital properties that are involved inside the policy, which ones are now, which ones might be later. It could be a good moment too to even inventory your properties, so you have a good idea the things that you do need to be thinking about around this. The WCAG conformance level that each of those properties must meet, the timelines to conformance. And when I talk about the timeline to conformance, I generally think about that as like a remediation period to bring a site up to a baseline level of conformance, which I would typically put at making sure everything that can be detected through an automated scan is solved, but also all high severity issues that might be a blocker to someone using the site. How your conformance is tracked. That's where we get into the reporting stuff. How often are audits happening? How often is user testing happen with members of the disabled community? How often is automated scans run? How often is QA doing things? Those kind of information around conformance tracking. How is that mechanism to report set up? How are the reports gathered? What's the central repository for those reports? Who's getting the reports? What are the stakeholders? Is it legal and compliance? Is it marketing? Is it product owners? That would need to be set up. And how do you have access to subject matter experts? So we consider, as we're talking with clients, the formation of a center of excellence around accessibility, for example, so that there's a part of the organization where people can come to not only find out about the policy, but also get help if they need it with accessibility, whether it's from a design angle or a development angle. So understanding who to go to for help is key there. Then we look at what the expectations for conformance are, not only during remediation, but then once you reach that desired level, what kind of expectation goes into place then to both help maintain the baseline, and then how the organization will handle other accessibility issues that might be of a lesser severity, but still should be probably solved to bring the site to a higher and higher level of conformance. And what expectations are you going to have with vendors? I mentioned that this can be an important document for them, but even if you don't share it with them, having the information about the expectations that you have for what vendors are delivering to you is still very key here, so that as procurement or individual product owners or other people who might be purchasing things to put on the website know what the expectations are. But also, if you're contracting for people who are going to work on the site, very important to have that here. And then you may have other sections or documents that you want to put into this policy as well. There's no real rule around the number of things you can add to it to help bolster the policy and its acceptance within your organization. And then also keep in mind that it's more than just a document to write it and then put it away somewhere. Unfortunately, I've seen organizations that do that. They write this up, but then they never really do anything with it and they never really implement it. And because this is so necessary in these days to make sure our sites are in fact conformant, it's really important to have accountability built into this. I mentioned the sections around accountability, but then you really have to drive forward on them, making sure any KPIs you write in are met, making sure that the people who are having to enforce this policy are doing the work. So the accountability is key. This document should also stay living as well, so that you're making an update on regular intervals. I would suggest at least every 6 months, but depending on your cadence of change, it could also be quarterly, to go in and make updates on how the timelines are going. Are there any new sites or apps that now need to be subject to the policy, or that it's time for them to be subject to the policy? And this policy really becomes the centerpiece of a sustainable accessibility program, and starts to inform changes to the software development lifecycle and how the teams who work on these products actually do that work, report that work, and ensure that conformance stays high for the customers. But then also, is it going to run into trouble with either legal or regulatory bodies at the same time? So that's the rundown on the accessibility policy. And now I'm going to hand it off to Michele to talk to us about accessibility statements.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. And I think that before going to the nuances of this statement, I think it is important to notice one aspect. If we consider the activities that we all do on accessibility, we tend to be extremely practical. We define KPIs, we define targets that are related to fixing number of issues or getting to a certain conformance level. I find quite interesting and actually very effective that the European Accessibility Act, together with obviously having accessible digital properties, emphasizes a lot, almost same importance in demonstrating that there are processes in place that guarantee a sustainable accessibility program. So for the European Accessibility Act, it is essential to have documentation, to provide documentation if requested, around the actions that have been taken. We all know that changing our processes probably is one of the most time-consuming and resource-demanding activity. But it is also a mirror of the commitment of understanding that accessibility is a requirement, not just an annual involvement of a third party that gives me an audit result. So that becomes part of the way we work. And all the aspects that Jeff highlighted around the policy are definitely going in that direction. And I think that this is an interesting angle also considering the European Accessibility Act. With that said, let's review the accessibility statement. So the scope of the accessibility statement is being a public-facing document that tells your visitors, so whether they access the website or the apps, what you're doing for accessibility. It speaks about your commitment, the actions you are taking. And second, but not in importance, it gives your visitors a way to get in touch with you in case they are having problems. Those are the two main goals of the statement. The statement should be available in every website or app, and you should have a I mean, this may be easy to implement on the website, might be more complicated on the apps, but it should be available on every page. Typically on the website, there is a link in the footer alongside with your privacy statement and the terms and conditions. Same structure, same spirit. In some cases, the accessibility statement might be required as part of a regulation. We'll discuss later the several aspects related to the European Accessibility Act and, let's say, the freedom that the different member states of the European community have in terms of customizing the requirements or restricting the requirements around that are defined by the European Accessibility Act. And one of these is, for example, providing a statement with a specific template. In the United States, we see that routinely plaintiffs' attorneys look as a first check the statement. It is one of the first recommended action, having a statement available on every page. We have seen many claims that report in the United States the absence of a statement as one important factor in the claim.
If I could just add to that for just a second, Michele, what we see in the claims too. Not only are attorneys looking for a statement, but in some cases, in a settlement agreement, we're also seeing instances where, as part of the settlement, they're wanting to see a skip link put in place that directly links to an accessibility statement. So I think for anybody who thinks not having a statement isn't actually giving you some risk by saying you're doing things around accessibility and items like that, know that, as Michele said, plaintiffs are looking to see if a statement is in place and calling it out in claims if it's not. And secondly, in settlement agreements, we're now seeing more and more the request for that skip link to be in place so that somebody doesn't have to travel all the way to the footer to find that accessibility statement. So both of those things should be taken into account by legal teams, certainly.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. And the importance of the skip link to the statement in consideration of the statement, including the fastest way to get in touch in case you have problems and troubles using the website or the app, is that becomes a tool. So it becomes definitely potentially the only way a customer could get in touch in case of issues that are preventing a smooth navigation with assistive technology. Let's review together the main aspects that should be included into an accessibility statement for a US digital property. First of all, the company that owns the website. It seems trivial, but actually is one of the aspects that we are seeing often failing. The website URL, and this is kind of the confirmation that these statements applies to that specific URL or the name of the app. The web content accessibility guideline level, the site or the app conforms to, and the efforts that have been done in order to conform. So here is the storytelling part of the US accessibility statement. It's important to explain the commitment with the relevant information, providing sort of an extract of the policy that Jeff was talking about, demonstrating that there have been amendments that we have performed to our processes, demonstrating that it's not just a unique focus on remediation, but also on monitoring, error prevention, what has been done in order to prevent our team to add errors, and something that indicates your ability to quickly remediate errors. There are several ways to do this, but in general, it's always in your story. Mix the adoption of technology, maybe valid partners, and human beings. So experts that are actually actively working on the site and performing actions to guarantee the maximum conformance level over time. And last but not least, like we said before, a phone number and an email address to get in touch. So this is the second main feature and function of a statement. Jeff, anything to add on this?
Yeah, a couple things here. First, we should have said this as we got into the statement level, into the statement material. Michele and I are not attorneys. We are not providing legal advice here, and certainly everything we're talking about around these statements, you should absolutely work with your legal teams on that. So everybody in the organization is in lockstep of what you're putting out with this material. On contact information, both forms are ideal to have there so that somebody can contact by phone or email, whatever works best for them. If you don't have an email address available, and I know many organizations don't, if you're sending people to a contact form, make sure that form is accessible. If you're sending them to a form that's not accessible, that's just going to cause obviously more problems down the line. And if you've got an elaborate contact situation where you might send people to a chatbot or an email or some other things, make an option that is as clear-cut as possible for people who are needing an accessible version of it. I've seen some contact pages recently that I can't figure out necessarily how to make a contact to somebody. And so you want to make sure that there's not a lot of friction there if someone's actually needing help, who's in the disabled community, to get the help that they need to complete whatever action on the site that they have.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. And needless to say that if you actually have a team responding to the phone, make sure that they are trained in at least understanding which could be the difficulties and the challenges that a user with disabilities might have interacting with the website or the native app. So a baseline training on what accessibility is and what could be the typical interaction that a user of assistive technology might have on the website would be highly recommended. So your customer care will be able to understand the need, support where possible your visitor, your customer, and possibly send any request or any note to the appropriate team to remediate or resolve, or simply send the feedback to the right team. Here we have an example of the accessibility statement that would, let's say, comply to the expectations for a U.S. accessibility statement. So you see that there is an initial body with the general information, so where there is the explain the commitment, specifying the name of the organization and the website URL, the guideline that will be supported, and or at least the company's aim to confirm on the website. There is a disclaimer that specify the fact that this is a constantly ongoing process, and there might be issues like we have issues in any digital property. They just happen. And then there is the contact us area where you can have both, in this case, the email address and the phone number, and the additional information that this ABC Corp company would like to receive in case the user has some difficulties. in the deck, you will also find the link to other examples. So I don't think it would be an excellent use of our time today to go through that example in details, but you will find it in the deck when we'll send it. Let's see now what goes in the European accessibility statement. First of all, as for the United States, there isn't a fixed template in the mentioned in the European Accessibility Act. Although there are exceptions, we'll briefly touch those exceptions later. So first of all, there is an introduction which covers the purpose and the scope of the accessibility statement, identify the digital product, the legal entity, and the markets that in Europe that that the website serves. There is the detail of the standard that has been used and the company aims to comply to, and the date of publication of the website. The date of the last review of the website, and also the specifying the date when the site will be reviewed next. This is a sort of long introduction, but is one of the, like I said, is one of the requirements. Is not in a templatized format, but is defined pretty clear in terms of content that we need to provide. Secondly, the European accessibility statement requires a description of the site or the apps, of course, and the accessibility measures. It's supposed to be a plain language description of the features that are available or the needs that are satisfied. So, like supporting the keyboard navigation, there are area landmarks, caption, adjustable contrast, everything that is included in the website as part of accessibility support or support of assistive technology. Then there is the set of details that are related to the ongoing efforts to maintain the accessibility, similar to what I mentioned before. So providing depth on what the company is doing, initiatives, investment in terms of maintaining accessibility. Often training program, testing methodology, how the company is collects and use the user feedback, the processes to update the website in case of accessibility issues. Those are very welcome to be added and emphasized in this session. And while I go through, you understand that the accessibility statement in Europe is supposed to be a lot richer than the one that we have in the United States. And in a few seconds, I think that Jeff and I will also make some considerations that represents our point of view on the amount of details that are required in the European accessibility statement. To proceed, it is required to specify the conformance status. Normally, the conformance status is conforms, partially conforms, does not conform. And in case somebody will ask, we need to be ready to provide evidence of the status. So it is important also to notice that. You see on the slide that together with the Web Content Accessibility Guideline, there is also the EN 301509 mentioned. It is the technical reference connected to the European Accessibility Act. It mirrors the Web Content Accessibility Guideline in its version 2.1 AA. So every action you are taking in the US that will satisfy the European Accessibility Act as well. consider that there is already a approved draft of the EN 301509 that will upgrade the success criteria, mirroring the Web Content Accessibility Guideline 2.2 AA. So that is the standard that we recommend to follow anyway. Going ahead is not finished, unfortunately, the list of information that it is expected to be included in the European Accessibility Statement. Any limitation or any alternative that are available, specifying the list of issues, so why those requires an alternative. That could be the product carousel is not keyboard operable, and there is in the interim workaround. So it is expected also to list these limitations and why a workaround was an alternative was necessary. Obviously, it would be very welcome to also mention a target date for these limitations to be removed. If applicable, there is the possibility to explain why certain requirements can be met, referencing to the disproportionate burden. All the lawyers, expert in accessibility in EU, recommended not to mention disproportionate burden. Is very complicated to convince that nowadays there are such a big obstacles to make a digital property accessible. So the recommendation is not to go in that direction. Otherwise, we are in situations like we have 10,000 legacy videos, and if we close caption all of them, that will jeopardize the core operations in making the site accessible or maintaining the accessibility. That will be an accepted disproportionate burden, but the product listing page is not accessible because it would take too much for us to remediate it. Well, that it is an essential step in your purchase journey in case we are talking about an e-commerce, and the technology might not support you. The technology available might not support you in demonstrating the big effort that you are facing. So the recommendation is to apply this to archived information or obsolete information, not to the core flows of your website. Almost completed the list of requirements of the European Accessibility Act. So the enforcement and complaints. So the authority complaints can be addressed to. That is quite typical in Europe that while the private claims or class actions are possible, typically the complaints will go through a government agency that will take the request, will review the request, will contact the company, will agree a plan to remediate, and then take actions in case the remediation is not happening within the timeline required. But normally the purpose of this section is to clarify that the user should go first to contact the company, and then in case there is any request, escalate to the agency or the authority that is supposed to regulate accessibility. And again, last but not least, contact information, so the customer can reach out and get support. Same comments and details that we have discussed for the United States statements, of course, applies to Europe as well. Consider that some countries might have additional requirements. The European Accessibility Act is a legal floor and has been defined with the scope of harmonizing across all the member states the accessibility efforts and requirements. But the problem is that every member state has the options to create more restrictive requirements to the European Accessibility Act, and from a technical point of view, to the EN 301-549, or let's say, in other words, the Web Content Accessibility Guideline 2.2 AA list of success criteria. The typical additional requirements is on the statement. And we have, in particular, two member states that already have provided templates to follow. One is Italy, with the accessibility declaration that is required to follow a specific template, and also published on the website, and with the possibility to be a document that the user can download. And France, that in case the company is reaching a certain amount of annual revenue, they need to comply to a set of requirements that were part of a law already existing in France that is more restrictive than the European Accessibility Act, and again, in terms of accessibility statement. Consider just a very quick parenthesis that the other restrictions, or let's say differences that we may find across the European countries, are related to the penalties for non-compliance or not respecting the requirements. In the deck, you will find a number of links where you can see examples for the European accessibility statement samples. I'll leave you all to follow these links and check for the benefit of time. And I think that probably the last slide allow us to make some consideration and analysis. So in Europe is, like I said before, the European Accessibility Act represents a legal floor, but is kind of essential to understand which are the countries where you have requirements or responsibilities that are restrictions of the European Accessibility Act. I was mentioning France before. So in France, in case your annual turnover is above 250 million euros per year, you need to comply to the RGAA regulation, which provides an additional set of requirements in terms of the statement and in terms of documentation that you need to include, which means evidence of audits, compliance level, conformance level, and a list of non-conformances. If the European Accessibility Act applies to services that are provided in EU, but related to companies that may not be based in Europe. So if you are a US company operating in Europe, consider addendums to your US accessibility statement to get closer to the requirements that are included into the European Accessibility Act. But to do this, our recommendation is to be very strategic, and Jeff and I would like to spend just a few seconds on our opinion on this point specifically. Jeff, back to you.
Yeah, as you can imagine, those of you who are working inside the US and have watched how legal things have happened in the US over the past few years, you can imagine how putting the amount of detail from the template that Michele went over into a US accessibility statement can be highly risky, because in some ways it is a blueprint for serial plaintiffs to know exactly what's wrong on your site. So it would definitely be something you'd want to consult with your legal counsel with, and to help understand the pluses and minuses. Like, do you add all that material into your statement? Is it less risky to not report something to your European customers versus, keeping that away from the eyes of the serial plaintiffs that we have in the US? Do you consider something like geo-blocking, so that you are presenting a European statement only to the European countries that it is subject for? Now, that wouldn't keep everybody from the US away from it, of course, because you could VPN over to that, but you'd have to think to VPN over to that. And some of those serial plaintiffs aren't necessarily going to take the extra time to figure out what countries might have certain things listed for sites and not others. So it is, very much a strategic option on what you might choose to do as an organization in the US that is serving, aspects of the EU. And of course, it only gets, a little more consideration goes into what countries do you need to report into, because you may need to make a report into France, but maybe not to Italy. So there's a lot of stuff to consider there.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I think that it is now the best time to answer a few of the questions that we have received. Jeff, do you want to pick one?
Yeah, we've got some good ones here. The first one is, my company site is owned by the US firm, but contains pages for international firms for which the US firm does not control the content. They only have control over the module CMS that other firms use. How should we account for this in our statement? So again, I think this is a perfect one to, consult with your counsel about and understand how they, think about that in terms of those European areas that are, that have content present. I think in terms of the US statement, unless this material is specifically geo-blocked, I also don't think you actually mentioned it in your US statement. From the US perspective, it's the same. I think the what needs to be looked at with your counsel is what aspects of that do you need to report to the other countries, and then do you geo block that in some way so it's only available to those folks coming in from those locations. Is there anything you'd add to that, Michaela, that perhaps I'm not thinking about in this case? And of course, I'll say again, as I said a few minutes ago, we're not attorneys and not providing legal advice. Definitely, consult your counsels internally as well. So the question here was, my company's site is owned by the US firm, but contains pages for international firms, which the US firm does not control the content. How should we approach this nuance in our statement? To which I said, from a US perspective, I don't think you do, but then recommended, working with counsel to understand if you maybe needed to offer something that would perhaps be geo-blocked to those other specific areas.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, here, I don't think we can do anything better than just give this advice. Technically, you should have a statement in every country that is compliant with the regulatory of that country. But for all the reasons that you mentioned before, this could be, I mean, could put in jeopardy the company, because that will be simplifying. It will be simplifying a lot the work for the U.S. legal industry. What we'll do is, geo-blocking or providing the additional documentation by request. That could be another option. So adding some language that says, contact us in case you want to have any additional details. We'll be happy to provide you then with those.
We had another question, and Michele typed the answer to this, but I do want to put it into the recording as well, about skip links. It was asked, are people asking for skip links to the accessibility statement in addition to the skip link to the main content? And it is in addition to. So generally, as a baseline of skip links, I would say you want to have skip to main navigation, skip to main content, skip to footer, and you would add skip to accessibility statement into the mix of those base ones as well, so that it just becomes one. Some people may think it's a little redundant to the footer, but some people's footer links also have 15, 20 links down there. So giving that quick link straight to the accessibility page is good. I've seen some EU websites with a list of their local standards that the site doesn't comply with. Is it okay to put that in terms of WCAG versus EN 301-549 or RGAA or whatever country it's in? I think this, falls in that category of, listing addendums to it. And in some cases, I think you could have easily addendums to several if you fall under multiple countries regulatory. Would you add to that, Michele?
No, no, I don't have anything to add on that.
And then also from the same asker, is it best to list only the required path to purchase pages? If we have an enormous site, we can't list everything. I think my take on that is you at least need to list the primary templates or the multiple primary paths. So like for an e-commerce path, I think you would have to list obviously the purchase path, but then also things like finding store locations, how to get contact, how to get support. I think it's difficult to say that there are certain parts of the site that you would need to leave off, because if somebody's going there and it's not accessible and they go to look for it, then you might run into a little bit of trouble with the regulatory bodies in the EU because you left something out.
Yeah, precisely. This is the classic scenario where it is impossible to list everything, and probably would not be even beneficial to list everything. I would focus on the main function the digital property serves, and I think the Jeff examples on any e-commerce was spot on.
If you're serving multiple markets on your website, for example, if you're serving Belgium and France with a French language website for a German country, which enforcement authorities need to be listed? I would encourage you to work with your counsel on that, to be honest, to make sure that you are absolutely hitting the correct things that you need to do. I think we've already listed France as one that's going to get listed a lot because of their requirement. But I think that's a better question probably for your counsel to dig in and understand how that's being approached. If you have an accessibility statement and or international VPAT, do you still need to have a separate RGAA statement? Mick, I'm going to defer that one over to you because I think you're more versed in the RGAA side.
Yeah. The RGAA template reminds the VPAT, but contains a lot more. Actually, the data are substantially the same, are presented in different ways. So, such as the breakdown by user needs, so the kind of disability involved. So technically, so the requirements would apply in case in the France territory your annual turnover is above 250 millions, or you are a company from the public sector. Technically you should need the RGAA template to be filled. The VPAT is similar, but once again doesn't provide all the nuances that are required in the RGAA. And again, not to reiterate on what Jeff said, this is the result of our experience and all the research that we did. So I recommend to take our opinions as opinion, not as a strict legal advice. It's better to check with your legal team, and we are happy to support and have conversations in case you want to involve us.
So next one, I build websites in the US for small US companies, but I am really new to accessibility. Many of my clients want to edit the websites after I hand them off. How do I account for that so that I cannot be sued for changes they have made? So like we've said so many times, please consult an attorney. The way that I would think about this is that part of your contract would need to be something along the lines of, once I hand this off to you, it's yours, and changes you make are your responsibility to have. Obviously, work with an attorney to get that represented well within any contracts you're signing with, the organizations you're building websites for. And at the same time, make sure that, just verbally your clients understand that you can't be responsible if they're putting content in that, breaks accessibility. when it was, not your responsibility of what they're putting into the CMS after the fact. But do check with counsel on that so that you're representing that correctly, because I agree, it's a spot where somebody could try to come after you for mistakes that they're making. This is the last one in our queue that we have, and since we're at about 5 before the hour, I think this will be our last question in general. And I think, Mick, this will be a good one for you.
I guess so. Yeah. Go ahead.
I still haven't understood whether the accessibility declaration in Italy, due by September 23rd, refers to the year that is ending or the one that is about to begin.
Yeah, the short answer is nobody does. So nobody understands that. Beside the joke, the language is not very direct. It says that the Declaration of Accessibility needs to be updated once a year and not later than September 23rd. So yeah, I would rely on the date of first publication of the statement, and then I would update it within that date. So would be a good strategy, making sure it is updated regularly and within the timeline.
And I'm going to go ahead and close today's webinar.